Welcome to Women in Public Safety, where real life events meets raw truth. I'm Harriet, your host, and I'm also a state parole officer, dedicated to unraveling human complexities through true life cases that we will call Case Chronicles. So join me weekly as we explore gripping narratives from the front lines of law enforcement and social services. From triumph to despair, we will uncover resilience, vulnerability, and of course, justice. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media for the latest episodes and join the movement for change. Hey, everybody. This is Harriet Westmore with the Women in Public Safety podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss women who are on the front lines of healthcare, social worker, human services, law enforcement, and corrections. I want to welcome you back to another week. And this week is a Case Chronicle episode. I was going to do Case Chronicle episodes 3 times a month in conjunction with our regular podcast episodes. So this is case number 3. But before I get started to talk about a case study, true case for Case Chronicles segment today, I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping and want everybody to hit that like, subscribe, and share button on the YouTube channel. I want to try to get more people involved, and I want to try to get the algorithm to keep going up as far as the stats concerned. So also, I really would like to remind everybody to please keep your comments in a respectful form. If this is not the type of podcast or platform that you are interested in listening to, you certainly have a choice to move on to other podcasts that may be more to your liking. I like my space to be a respectful space for everyone. Everybody can make their comments, but please keep it respectful, and I appreciate that. All right, so without further ado, let's go into Case Chronicles number 3. This case, I want to give a shout out to my field partner who gave me this case to talk about, and on one of her many offenders that she has supervised, as well as I have in our years in working in law enforcement as a state parole officer. Today we're talking about sexual predators or sexual offenses that have been committed by offenders who have had inappropriate contact with minors. And I want to forewarn you, if this segment is a trigger for some of those who may have survived these type of crimes, you are certainly welcome to not listen to this particular case study for this week. Your mental health and your well-being is first and foremost a priority. So please, if some of the things that I talk about, although I talk things in general terms, I do not get graphic, but I try to talk and describe the element of the crime to where people can understand what has happened. And if it's a trigger for you, then please, by all means, you might want to skip this week's case study. All right, so with that being said, let's talk about sex offenders and their mentality overall based on our experience as a supervisor, parole, or probation officer. I found, because I do have a few sex offenders on my case, and I found they are interesting, not in a good way. I find that a lot of them can be very arrogant, very manipulative. That's part of their pattern of manipulation, and downright delusional, because they will justify, a lot of them, I'm not saying all, there's some who really understood and acknowledged their mistake and what they have done. But there's also others who have not necessarily acknowledged, but kind of justify why they committed crimes against minors, or just crimes against another person in an inappropriate way. I've heard really disgusting reasons that from, well, I didn't know that they were underage, to, well, the victim or the survivor came on to them. That one, that excuse, that always kind of rise me up with the hair on the back of my head to stand up, because first of all, if the victim or the survivor is 12 or younger, how can they possibly come on to you as a grown adult? But they really try to justify that. Well, you either blame it on the alcohol, blame it on because, well, they came on to me again as a child. This is this dichotomy and the sickness that a lot of them have in their minds. So I just kind of want to give you a background. I also want to give you a background of a lot of people may not understand or know the law as far as each sexual offense tiers. There's 3 tiers, and I'm going to give you kind of the gist of it from the state of where I'm from. The law is, and then this is Ohio. Tier 1 sex offenders, they are required to register as a sex offender every year for a period of 15 years. So those are usually offenses that are not felonies. They're felonies, but however, they're not what you call their lower tier. A lot of unsexually crime against a minor, unsexual lawful conduct with a minor is usually a tier 1. And those usually are ones that are like a 25-year-old male may have inappropriate sexual contact with a 15-year-old. She was clearly underage. Whether it was consensual or not, it's still a crime. So you are still charged, and you still have to register as a sex offender every year. You have to renew your registration for a period of 15 years. However, in Ohio, it can sometimes be reduced if there are no additional sexual offenses or felonies have been made throughout the years of being on supervision. And if the offender have successfully completed any type of sex offender treatment, and again, finishes probation or parole without any additional crimes, then that may be considered a reduction of registration. It's very discretionary. Under Ohio convictions, I'm reading, this includes child enticement, gross sexual imposition, legal use of minor in a nudity-oriented material, menacing by stalking with sexual motivation, unlawful restraint with motivation, and voyeurism. Those are considered under the Tier 1 registration law in Ohio. Tier 2 is more elevated. Sex offender who has committed what we call a Tier 2 have to register every 180 days for over a period of 25 years. And there's no early consideration for termination for Tier 2. And these offenses are child endangering, compelling prostitution, gross sexual imposition with the victim under the age of 13. They can be pandering obscenity involving a minor, pandering sexual oriented material involving minors. And again, there's no consideration for any reduction or not having to not register. You have to register every 6 months for the next 25 years. Tier 3 is what we call the sexual predator. They are, by far most the deviant of the tiers of the sexual offenders. And they have to register every 3 months, every 90 days for life. No exceptions. For life, you have to register with your county and state departments, sheriff's department, and with the state of your state for life every 90 days. These tiers are is the highest, and like I said, they're the highest deviancy of sexual predators. And these crimes include felonious assaults with sexual motivation, kidnapping of a minor not by a parent, or engage in sexual activity, murder and aggravated murder with sexual motivation, rape, sexual battery, unlawful death, or termination of a pregnancy as a result of committing or attempting to commit a felony with a sexual motivation. Those are your deviant, those are your predators, and those are your tier 3, and they will be registered for life. There's no deviancy, there's no getting off or having any consideration of not registering. Once you're classified as a tier 3 and tier 2s, there's no consideration of not registering. All right, so I just kind of wanted to give you a history and a background. This is for state of Ohio. Maybe each state, they may have the same tiers, but each state considerations may be different by state. So I'm only talking about my state, which is Ohio. Okay, so with that being said, that's kind of giving you the background. Let me talk about a case study, true case. This again was told to me with my field partner who had this particular offender on her caseload. He was a tier 3, so he had to register every 90 days for life, I believe. If I'm not, I could be wrong, but I think that's what his tier level was. He did time in prison for a sexual offense. He did years. He got out. Let me tell you about his personality, as told by my partner. He was arrogant. He was a middle class. He wasn't some low life, off the streets, low life living, low income. I mean, he wasn't, and I want people to understand, there's no profile of a predator, of a sexual offender. They could be right next door to you. They could be in your own family. They function just like everybody else. They have a job. They have families. They're married or not. They're law-abiding a citizen, so to speak. And I'm saying air quotes for those who are listening by audio. This particular individual, he was a retired from did years, worked in the auto industry, but he was a predator because he had inappropriate relationship with a minor. So he had to go to prison for that. Well, when he got out, he was on supervision and my partner, and he was, like I said, he was well off. He was tired. He made good money in the auto industry. And so he decided to buy a house, and he bought a house to rent out. Well, part of the conditions are also that you cannot live, especially if you're registering as a sex offender throughout the county and state. The county sheriff's office will notify the neighborhood that a sex offender lives in your area. That's part of the conditions. You have the neighborhood of where this potential offender lives have to be, the neighbors has to be notified. Well, and then also you cannot be residing near a school or a daycare or a church. You have to be within 1,000 feet away from these particular establishments. So of course he was in compliance with that part. He decided to buy a house because he wanted to rent out the house. So he purchased this house and he rented it to one of his friend's daughter. She's grown. She had 2 children, 2 girls, to be specific. So he rented the house out with to her because he's been a long time family friend, and the young lady and her 2 girls needed a place to stay. So he rented the house out to him. So when my partner would do visits, one of the things that she do is check in and see, or have you been around minors? No. Have you had any contact with minors? No. You have to, your phone or any type of electronic device you cannot have any access to internet, social media, or things, or even a camera on your phone. So we have to check and make sure that that these offenders are in compliance with that. My partner said something about him and his demeanor it just didn't sit right with her. When you do this type of work for years, you have to go by your instinct. You got to go by your gut feeling that something's just not right. You can't put your finger on it, but you know something in the back of your mind. Something's just not right. So she decided, okay, I'm going to pay closely attention. In the meantime, his friend, daughter, the one that he's renting the house to, the daughter's father, the actual father of this daughter, Fender knew this young lady and he think of her as a daughter. But the actual daughter's father contacted my partner and he voiced his concerns that this offender, who was his friend, because he was a friend of the family for years and years and years, I believe that something's not right with the relationship between my daughter and this offender. I've always had this is what the father is telling my partner. I've always had this feeling that he had some kind of inappropriate relationship with my daughter, but I just couldn't prove it. And every time when I approach her or tell her or ask her about it, she would be denied. She would deny it. But as a father, he just knew something wasn't right. So that kind of validated my partner's intuition that she felt something wasn't right with him and this whole dynamic situation between his, I would say, goddaughter. I'll just put it as the lady being his goddaughter. So she went to the home of where the goddaughter and her daughters are staying, and she spoke with her. And she asked the goddaughter if the offender has had contact with, her goddaughter now is now an adult. She has kids of her own, but has contact with her girls. And she denied it. And but then my partner spoke with him, the offender, and he said, well, I see her, she's renting a house from me. So-and-so is renting the house, but I don't go over there. She's like a daughter to me. She's like my goddaughter. And so I rented the house to her. I don't see the kids. I don't go over to the house though. But when I do, I see them in a public place. We go for ice cream or something like that. Or we go out in public. So it's not like I have long contact with the girls. I just, it's always in a public space. But like my partner had told him, stipulated, you're not to have any type of contact. I don't care who it is, with minors. And those girls, the little girls, are minors. But he's trying to justify, well, it's not at the house, it's in a public place. We go, I may take them for ice cream along with her mom, which is his goddaughter. But again, she's telling him, no, you cannot have any type of contact. So she did some more background check. She spoke with the father of the goddaughter again. And the fact that he's had contact, she went ahead and violated him because he went against the stipulation of his terms of conditions that he is not to have by any means no contact with minors. So she went and told the goddaughter that the offender is going back, is being violated because he has had contact with her girls. I don't care if it is, although it was supposedly in the public place, which we kind of doubt that. But the mom, the goddaughter, was very upset with my partner. He hasn't done anything. Why are you violating him? He didn't do anything. So it's the mom who, the goddaughter, is fighting against my partner. He will have to move out of his house because he's going back to, he's been violated. So he's been arrested and now he's waiting to go back before the parole board. And my partner said that the goddaughter was very, very upset. And she couldn't understand why does, the offender can't have contact. He's like a father to me. He's been helping me and my girls. He allowed me to stay here. I have no other, he's been helping me. Let me just say this about offenders. This is a part of the manipulation. It's clearly manipulation because he knew that this goddaughter, was probably needed a place to stay. And in exchange for having a place to stay, he will still have access to her and the daughters, because it was clearly noted that he did have inappropriate sexual contact with the goddaughter when she was as a minor. But what's interesting is that the goddaughter still wants to have a relationship with this offender, even though he had violated her as a child. Now she's continued to have a relationship with this man, and not only that, her two daughters are given access to this individual, and she's very upset about that. And my field partner told her, I can't do anything about the fact that you may have relationship with him, but I'm trying to protect your daughters. So again, she denied everything, but she eventually had to move. And when he went in front of the parole board, again, he denied it. He tried to justify that he should still continue to have contact with the goddaughter and the daughters. They're like family to me, but you clearly violated your parole conditions. And he flat out basically told my partner and the parole board that, you can lock him back up, but he's still going to have contact with them. It doesn't matter. So just to have that arrogance and to have that mindset that he feels that you're not going to stop me from having access to those girls or to her or because it was almost like an obsession with him. It was just, he couldn't understand why he couldn't continue on that relationship when clearly he went to prison for that same type of behavior. So I wanted to bring that out. So he did. I went back to prison. I'm not sure how long he stayed, and she no longer has his case. My partner no longer has his case. So I don't know the outcome of it, but I mean, it was one of those disturbing cases for her, because not only the arrogance of him and the delusion and trying to justify his actions, it's the victim / survivor is still attached to this person. She still want to have a relationship. Even her own father had this suspicion that his friend was messing around with his daughter. But as he said, he couldn't actually prove it, and daughter had denied it. But it was clearly obvious. And for him now to purposely buy a house for the girl and her daughters to live in, still gave him access to them. And now it's passing down to more young victims. So sexual offenders, there's a controversy of whether they, when you go into sex offender programs or treatment, can they be rehabilitated or cured? I don't know. Again, it's all in the mindset. If you understand and acknowledge what you've done, and a lot of them is they were at one time victims and violated themselves, so they keep perpetuating the crime. They become offenders instead of, they become the actual sex offenders where they were once offended and violated themselves. But to continually try to justify and continue on that type of behavior, then there's no rehabilitation for that. This is my opinion. So I have offenders on my caseload that they'll try to push that envelope as part of the manipulation. They try to push it. They try to push the envelope to see how far they can go. And they will ask questions. Well, if so-and-so is around, can I have contact with minor? This is my family, but people will be there. No means no, you can't have contact. And these are people, we're talking about pastors of churches. We are talking about teachers. We are talking about like everyday good jobs, corporate, whether it's corporate or blue collar, does not matter. We're talking about Boy Scout leaders, Girl Scout leaders, youth pastors, anybody or kids themselves, older kids themselves now being offenders to younger kids. It runs the gamut. And those are another hard case load to have to supervise because of the manipulation and the justification of why they did what they did. So I just want people to be aware. There's no red letter mark on these offenders' forehead that kind of, let you know who they are. They could be right next to you. They could be your next door neighbor. They could be your employer. They could be your fellow church member. They could be your pastor. People don't want to admit that or acknowledge that, but a lot of the predatoriness comes in churches, unfortunately. So I just wanted to, that's another good case. And I appreciate my partner sharing that with me and allowing me to tell the story. But I just want people to be aware of your surroundings and just trust your instincts. When something is not right in your spirit, then, don't ignore it. Ask questions, report it, because you're pretty much you could be saving someone's life. And especially with minors, and they're suffering in silence because they're afraid to tell somebody because they feel like they're not going to be believed. And that's, a whole nother issue. And I think people who work in social services as a caseworker can definitely attest to this, that you have a lot of sexually abused children who try to tell their parents. They didn't believe them. They rather have, especially when it's single moms, the girl, their daughters try to tell the mom that their boyfriends are messing with them. Mamas don't want to believe that. They'll rather put the daughters out and then keep the bastard that's been abusing their daughter. These are kind of things that we as public service and human service professional deal with every day. And it takes a toll on you mentally. You have to ask yourself, how can we make a difference? Well, it starts from home. The learning starts from home. Listen to your kids. If your kids are telling you that something is wrong and they are being violated, listen to them. Don't sacrifice your kids because you want to have a man around, so-called man. And your man probably got with you because he wanted to get access to your daughters or your sons. So it has to stop. And people who care about our kids and our community, we're going to be the ones that's going to step up and stop it one way or the other. And if that means your kids out of your household to save them and make sure they get the help that they need, then that's what's going to have to be. And truth be told, I know for a fact, as I was a brief caseworker, a lot of the mothers, they rather have their kids out of the house, the girls, or remove them out of the home, just so they can keep that male in the house, so the man could, their boyfriends or whatever, can stay there. They'll put their kids in foster care. They'd rather put their kids in foster care or whatever in order to keep that man. It's a sick world that we live in, sick society. But the end of case number 3. Again, hit that like and subscribe button, and I will talk with you next week for episode number 13 for the Women in Public Safety podcast. Everybody be safe, and I'll talk with you soon. Bye.